really hit you. I do not really get that. Like, why were they censoring, just because he said the word COVID and all that?
I think we're streaming.
Okay.
Looks like it. Is it happening?
Let me go look at your chat.
Oh, yeah, it's happening. It's happening. Okay.
All right, cool.
All right, yeah, hopefully we'll see people
in
the chat here. But yeah, YouTube has made this, and I do not have the mental energy to put up with YouTube's crap. Why didn't they just leave it the way it was? It worked. You just hit a button. You started streaming. Oh, well. How's everyone doing today?
I just woke up myself. I'm drinking some coffee I left out last night. Went cold, but still going to drink it.
Yeah. Well, we're here right now doing the AMA. We have Wes and Chris so far. Yeah, I think we're all kind of down. I'm still kind of recovering from COVID. I got my final phone exam from my doctor tomorrow to hopefully, finish all this up and let me know how it's actually all shaken out and what to expect, which kind of brings us to our first question.
Nope, sorry. There we go.
Yeah. Asked back in December, because this is the December 2020 AMA. Yes, I am very late doing it. But Thomas Jown, I believe that's Thomas Urbanski, asked, Happy New Year. How was your New Year's Eve? Well, I think y'all know the answer by now. On Christmas Eve, I was officially diagnosed with COVID-19. Had to go on to lockdown and everything, which means I couldn't do Christmas or New Year's. And so even when I got the all clear from that, it's still just kind of dragging because these effects really, really linger. So.
Well, Shane, I've heard a lot of people weren't able to celebrate Christmas because of all the government lockdowns. They weren't able to work.
Well, that's true. Hey, Scorch, how you doing?
Yeah, I think you mentioned it, and I think it was your year roundup. That one, guy who owns that famous diner or whatever, said he almost filed for bankruptcy and he couldn't celebrate Christmas simply because he couldn't afford to buy presents for his kids and wife.
Yeah. Well, I mean, my kids had Christmas and they had presents. I just couldn't be with them, and that kind of hurt because I could hear them out in the living room having fun and I couldn't join them. And
yeah, they had to slip your presents under the door.
Yeah.
Well, I guess on Christmas I got myself a new Ninja blender. I did not expect that. It's really badass. It has the bullet. It has like the bullet equivalents or Ninja piece, attached. It's got the two. It's like
hey, you're dropping
like
out. You're dropping out, Wes.
It has the NutriBullet equivalents, but except it's got two little blades that point straight upward in the middle of the top, along with the initial blades that would be in a NutriBullet. It has its own little pitcher deal that you can put on, clamp on, and you have a cheese grater. You have a mandolin, and other attachments. You basically flip the disc around to do those different things, to slice or to grate. Find the dough paddle from my old Ninja set that my dad got before he died. My dad got me before he died, because he died before he could give it to me at 19th birthday. I still have that old Ninja. I made a half a gallon of eggnog, had a copious amount of bourbon in it. I'm surprised I didn't wake up sick the next day after Christmas, as I stayed up gaming and I drank most of it.
Yeah, I once funny thing about eggnog. I once saw a funny thing about how a guy overindulges on the eggnog and he's sick the next day, and and his friend's asking, "Oh, what did that? The bourbon or the raw eggs?" And the guy goes, "Both."
Rainbow Asteroids says, so he got the best blender to dispose of a body. Maybe the guy could have used that in the movie Fargo when he was trying to use the wood chipper.
Well, don't get sick on eggnog. Imagine a marshmallow coming up.
Well, not to mention if you're drinking authentic eggnog, that has raw egg in it. So,
well, if you have, the reason they did that, the reason they used a copious amount of alcohol was to sterilize the said egg.
Yeah.
246 TNT, how you doing? So, Chris, what about you? Christmas and New Year's?
Well, like I said, could have been better. I mean, I had a good time. I got to see my family, but still, with what I've been going through and all that, it's...
Yeah.
You know what I mean...
At least you got to see your family. That's more than a lot of people have been allowed to do in some places.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
They're like, no, don't get together with your family on Thanksgiving and Christmas because virus.
Yeah, and they're wondering why last year there was a high suicide and depression rate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think Tom Wood's fact-free lockdown hysteria was probably the best the best baseline expose against the lockdown shenanigans you could ever get.
Yeah, I think I saw that. That was pretty good.
Yeah, I have tried to get it. I've tried to give. I went to the website to install it multiple times. The website's little app system that lets you download the book, PDF, and all that refused to work multiple times. One day I finally clicked that son of a bitch. Motherfucker, give it! Well, finally it did. And I'm like, ugh. And it showed statistics. It showed a lot of framework. Plus, I still get DM'd because I'm subscribed to, Tom Woods, my private email, my original email, my private one. I've had it for years. But he sends the statistics to back up against the hysteria and the hype, the narrative spinning, like hard facts, and he still sends them an email notification. I read them every so often. It's like, will this convince your doomer friends? Will this convince the ignorant? Like, he is brutal with it.
Yeah, squeaks on the chat.
Yeah, hey Pip and hey John. All right, I think we can go over to this second and final question then, because there's lots stuck into it.
It's a big one.
Yep, Josh Havens is asking. Hang on. Sorry about that. I'm so sorry about last month's question. I will no longer ask about superlatives. It's okay. I was just giving you a hard time. But... I came across this meme entitled, "What Have the Unions Done for Us?" And he gives us a whole big long list that I think we'll have to break down. Yeah, Pip, come on in. Talk about unions with us. We could probably start with his numbers 1 and 3, the 2-day weekend and the 8-hour working day. Hey, Pip.
And here's our favorite Australian.
Oh boy, unions. My least favorite organization. At least the corporal.
So how did the unions bring us 2-day weekends and 8-hour working days? They didn't.
Yeah, they didn't. I actually looked this up, and the 2-day weekend actually predates a lot of unions. The first company that ever did it in the 1880s, but it was Henry Ford that popularized it, and
he also popularized the 8-hour work days due to the assembly lines taking up a lot of slack for the workforce, because they didn't have to bust their asses to make the same vehicle parts and put them together to make the vehicles. Mm-hmm. And he also increased the shit out of the pay as well on top of it, because the productivity and the amount of sales that went out due to how much easier it was to make the cars. He can get more out.
He had opened up the market to a segment of the population that just couldn't even afford it before, and basically greatly expanded the market. When Standard Oil did that, they were called a monopoly, but there you go.
Yeah, and there's double standards on these fucks on that.
Yeah, and
But
not to,
that's essentially what happened. So that's easy to debunk if you actually know your history in automotives and mechanics
and
stuff.
Yeah.
You
and
know
not
this shit.
and I was gonna say, from a philosophical point of view, it makes no sense, to have your workers, spending pretty much their entire time at work, because we always hear about how, in order to keep an economy, healthy, we need people working. But to a degree, we also need people buying and saving. And how are they supposed to do that if they're at work all the time?
Well, and here I think is a good rule of thumb, a good thought experiment to do with each of these. Imagine going into Bangladesh and mandating the 2-day weekend and the 8-hour working day, and ask yourself, what's going to happen to the people there when you do that?
If I remember correctly, they did do a lot of stuff like that, and guess what? It didn't end well.
No, people starved.
Or
because
or they even turned to worse jobs like prostitution or sharecropping.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, because it turns out, like, people don't want to work any more than they have to. So if they can meet their needs with an 8-hour workday, that's how much they'll work. If they're working more than that, it's because they need to.
Yeah, that's why I hate, these rich entitled brats that are like, oh, these people in the third world are working in sweatshops. It's like, well, yeah, but you got to remember, you can't compare our way of life to theirs. A lot of these people, come from really terrible countries that are not in the best condition economic wise, and for a lot of them, they gladly take the sweatshop job because it's the best option available to them.
Well, the sweatshop gives them 3 meals a day. They can afford bicycles or even cars for the first time. They don't have to worry, about making the rent every month.
Yeah, and as one Kenyan female economist, I forgot her name. I think her name was Junarunga or whatever. I can't pronounce his name. She's Kenyan. She said that it's also not unheard of for a lot of people to work at these sweatshops for like 5 years or so, and then they take the skills they learned from working in those factories and they start their own businesses.
Yeah, but that's the point is the sweatshops actually do pay them a living wage. They get their 3 squares a day, the roof over their head, stuff like that.
Yeah, and
maybe even a luxury item or two.
And that's another thing that I also find funny about the anti-sweatshop people is they're like, oh, and these people are only getting paid $1 American a day or whatever. And I'm like, yeah, and they live in the third world, and a lot of the third world countries, $1 American can get you a lot of stuff.
Oh, yeah, look at the purchasing power.
Yeah.
Yep.
Wage is just a number.
Yep. So, let's see. I skipped number 2, so let's do that. Maternity and paternity leave. I think we've had that for thousands of years, haven't we?
We've had maternity and paternity leave, and we've had holiday pays for centuries of businesses all around. For centuries. Minimum.
Yeah, that's his number 5 is paid holidays.
Well, yeah, and another thing, and I've actually pointed this out, another thing about maternity leave, the reason why we didn't see a lot of maternity leave back in, like in the old days was simply because, remember, people need to remember that for a long time, America was a more traditional society, and with the idea being the men were out working and the women stayed at home and took care of the kids and whatnot, but maternity leave was introduced because we got more women in the workforce,
But even that was more of a 20th century phenomenon. Up through the 19th century, women were in the workforce all over the place.
Yeah. They were, and what's funny, before 1790s naturalization and other acts that kind of fucked up the ability to vote, because originally you had, if you were a property owner, you wanted to sign up to vote on into the taxation system, and if if you worked, you were to be able to vote. That was the bare minimum for the criteria, and essentially you'd be a registered voter that way. Yeah. And the first woman in the United States to get voting was before 1790 occurred, because that fucked shit up sideways. Silly Sally.
Well, because you could vote if you were a property owner. So if you were a single woman who had property, then, you could vote. If you got married, then it was your husband that voted, not because they hated women, but because they wanted basically one vote per property. You were basically voting on you were voting on behalf of the value of your property and the taxes that you paid in. Not one vote per person. So it was a completely different way of thinking about it than we have today.
Yeah, and the other thing too was, excuse me. The other thing too was the first woman to ever vote was she was a widow. She was widowed, and her husband died. So.
Yeah, I mean, if you're a widow and you've gained all your husband's property, you gain the right to vote too.
And she busted her ass. I mean, she busted her ass taking over her husband, her late husband's job, and she went at it. And it was kicking her ass, so her kids had to come in and help her from time to time. And this town saw this and said, you know what, this social whatever. Let's lift it for her because she's proven her point. So, and they all agreed, and they said, "Fuck it, let's let her vote," and they got her in. And again, 1790 fucked that whole scene up long term, and you see some of its unintended consequences show up in the universal and women's suffrage over time. Even though, let's ignore the fact most men didn't vote. I had lost the power to vote along with women.
Yep. So let's see. We ended up skipping over number 4, which is a retirement age and workplace pensions. I mean, that wasn't even really an issue until the 20th century because people didn't live long enough.
Yeah, that's what I brought up. I mean, it's like up until, the Industrial Revolution and improvement in agricultural, most people only lived to, it was the life expectancy, if I recall correctly, was only in their mid-50s. So a lot of people didn't live long enough to become so old that they're like, you know what, I've got enough money, I'm too old, I'm just going to sit down and spend the last few years of my life just, just relaxing,
Well, and when Social Security first came out, the idea of it was that very few people would live long enough to actually draw from it.
Yeah.
So you were just taking care of the very few people who would live that long. It wasn't like a standard thing that, you could look forward to in your autumn years.
Yeah, that's the problem with Social Security and Medicare is that people are living longer. We're getting healthier, we're living longer, and many people are pointing out,
thanks to capitalism.
Yeah, they're pointing out that, listen, we've got all these people living longer. How the hell are we going to pay for all of it? And rather than the politicians admitting, yeah, I mean, okay, maybe 80 years ago it worked, but now we understand it doesn't work. Nope, they don't do that.
No, personally, they're not going to.
Yeah. Personally, I see the retirement age thing as artificial government construct anyway.
Yeah.
Because, the average age of retirement in Australia is 55.2 or something, in some wretched fraction. Why is it specifically 55? Because the government taxes you if you try and withdraw from your superannuation fund before you're 55 and no longer working. That's why it's 55.
Well, and another thing too, Pip, is that, there's a lot of people, especially with advanced medicine, older people are much healthier than they used to be. And there's plenty of cases of people even in their 70s saying, you know what, I've still got energy. I can't sit around and do nothing. I mean, my grandpa, didn't retire until 3 years before he died, and he was in his 80s when he retired, because he grew up on a farm in the Midwest. He had a strong work ethic. He was not the type that could sit around and do nothing. He had to be out doing something.
And it's a lot healthier if you end up being a lot healthier if you keep working as well. Like my own grandfather is fucking 80 something now, but he just straight up refuses to retire. And what actually ended up doing him in is like he can't work nearly as much as he can as he could previously. But what really did him in was he was unfortunately involved in a car accident and hospitalized, and that's when his health started to take a downturn because he wasn't active.
Oh yeah, you know, I mean, that's the same
It's
thing
like
happened.
he aged like a decade because he was sitting in a friggin' hospital bed.
Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of what happened to my grandpa. He, you know, he continued to work up until he was 80 years old, and what ultimately forced him to stop was, he did have congestive heart disease, and he ended up becoming too weak to work, so he spent most of his time sitting down, and he just went downhill from there.
But I mean, if you look at like my generation and younger, fewer of us are smoking, we're eating healthier, things like that. So we should be in even better shape when we get up to that age.
Oh yeah, Shane, it reminds me of this line from the John Stossel special, Sick in America, Who's Healthcare Anyway, where that one Canadian doctor says we take modern medicine for granted. I mean, look at former Vice President Dick Cheney. He's had 2 heart attacks and a stroke, yet he's still active. He's able to go up, you know, a flight of stairs and all that and hold down a really tough career. 60 years ago, had he survived all those things, he would have been spending the majority of his time laying in bed with his eyes closed.
Well, I mean, just take my accident. If we hadn't had modern orthopedic surgery, you know, to kind of put my limbs back together, I probably wouldn't be walking or using my right arm or anything like that.
Yeah, you'd be in a wheelchair. You'd be in a wheelchair with a, you know, with a tube connected to your stomach.
Who knows?
Interesting thing too is this. Oh, excuse me. All right. The other interesting thing is you're talking about the average life expectancies of various populaces and peoples. Well, funny thing is, there were exceptions to the rather, you know, the average age rule at certain, you know, sometimes there were certain exceptions, like different Native Americans had a very high amount of, you know, had an unusually, you know, decent number of people that lived to be 70, 80, and up into their hundreds quite often. That was possible for a millennia potentially. Which, you know, and then you had people like in southern China, and then you had people that, like, at least since they've been around the societies, the different blue zones, like Korea, Greece, Sardinia, Italy, the Korea Peninsula.
Oh,
and and well, again, that doesn't change the rule, but they are unique exceptions to the rule.
Here's my other question, though. Why is it a good thing to have your pension tied to your workplace, as opposed to you getting paid the full value directly from your employer and then, you know, selecting whatever retirement annuity you want and putting the money into that yourself?
Oh yeah, there's many tragic stories, you know, of people, you know, working for a company for many years, and like they get that thing that said you're guaranteed a pension and all that, and they're about to retire, but in their final year there, something happens in the company and there's a massive layoff and they lose everything.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't really get, same with healthcare. I don't get why it's good tying that to a workplace. That makes no sense to me.
Yeah, going back to John Stossel, because believe it or not, his special "Who's Sick in America," that's what made me become a libertarian. He pointed that out too. It's like, you know, I mean, it's a nice idea, you know. Oh, I've got insurance and a pension for my job, but when you think about it, that ties you to your job. What if you quit to go to get another job, or you lose it? You know.
Well, and it didn't happen because of unions. It happened because of World War II, when they put on the wage and price freeze, and businesses couldn't attract workers, which were much needed at the time because 10 million people were overseas fighting a war. They couldn't attract workers with higher wages, so that's when they started doing the benefits like health care and the pensions and things like that.
Yeah. And contrary to what your history... Oh, sorry, Pip.
Of course, that was also further entrenched when the government introduced payroll taxes, because depending on how the laws are written, benefits aren't applicable for payroll taxes. So You pay your worker less, but you give them a shitload of benefits. The business ends up paying less in tax.
Well, and this is what, because people are going like, all these leftists are going like, well, we had 90% taxes in the 50s and 60s, and gee, that was, and what they don't understand is no one was paying those. What you did was you lived in corporate housing, so you didn't have rent, and so that's how you got it. And then you drove around in a company car with a chauffeur, and you flew around in a private jet. When Reagan got those taxes knocked down, people stopped doing that. They're like, hey, I want to choose my own place to live. I'm fine, driving a Honda or whatever. I'll buy a plane ticket like everyone else. But before they were just doing all of that just so they wouldn't get stuck with 90% taxes.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and we see this happen all the time. Every time a state always says, we're gonna increase taxes on big companies or whatever, just to to bring in some more revenue. What happens? Everyone leaves.
Yeah. Well, that's what California is doing, because everyone is leaving to Arizona or Nevada or Texas, and they're trying to do everything they can to say, no, you're still really in California, and so you owe us taxes.
Yeah.
I mean, there are a lot of financial advisors that go, yeah, if you're going to do that, get a good financial advisor so you can navigate all these crazy laws and actually get them to understand that, no, you're not in California anymore.
Yeah, I mean, that's like I said, that's why a lot of companies, even though they're owned, operated, and function in the United States, you'll often find that they're registered in the Cayman Islands or Ireland.
Yep.
Yeah.
I love how they do the high tax. I was like, here's the thing. Excuse me. At most, you only pay 45 to maybe 55% taxes at max. You had so many write-offs, loopholes, tax code, leaks you use to your advantage, and you.
Well, I mean, really, it's if you increase those taxes, it's not the billionaires who are going to be paying. It's the billionaires who are going to benefit because they run all the tax havens, especially the ones on the left, like Warren Buffett.
Okay, so...
All right. So, yeah, that takes care of 1 through 5. 6, well, I have no clue. Oh, what?
Can I say something about the paid holiday part, though? People talk about how unions gave us paid holiday. Well, if I recall correctly, for many, many centuries, not only were people given the holidays off, in many cases, it was actually illegal to have your business open on a holiday.
Well, I mean, it just kind of all depended. And America was, a lot more laissez-faire than that, but people, closed down for the holiday anyway because no one wanted to work on the holiday. The business owner wasn't there on a holiday. The business wouldn't even been open, so yeah.
Yeah.
Go home.
To be fair, their qualification of not working is not what we think. Like we think of oh, we've got Sunday off now, I can get time to do this and that. No, back in those days, you did pretty much nothing except eat basic chores and went to church.
Yep.
Even going outside and playing was considered quote unquote working.
That was oh god, this is so funny. If you can look it up, I think it was from Do Not Adjust Your Set. It was John Cleese and the two Ronnies. And John Cleese was Modern Man. And I think Ronnie Barker was Renaissance Man. And Ronnie Corbett was Medieval Man. And, just lampooning just all the different eras. And, John Cleese is like, well, I get 2 days off a week when I use them to, I forget whatever it was, watch sports or whatever. And Renaissance Man was, I get 1 day off for a week where I go to church. And Medieval Man was like, I get 1 day off a year where we all stand around in a circle and try and beat each other with sheep bladders. And then Renaissance Man says, I must admit the sheep bladders thing sounds a lot more fun. It's really funny. Check it out. It's on YouTube.
Yeah.
But all right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Number 6.
That takes us all through number 5. So 6. I have no clue what unions have to do this. He says LGBT equality rights.
The gay community originally got their ability to do what they wish by fighting against the government.
Yeah.
Justin Raimundo actually talked about this in his rather controversial pieces. I think that Gay Victimology and the Culture Kampf, and then the other piece he wrote about libertarian case against gay marriage. And by the way, he was a paleo-lib, ANCAP, and a bisexual Latino, so take that into consideration, folks, as I know a lot of people are going to screech about that.
Yeah.
So, fair warning, I actually have the... Quick.
Is everything coming through okay on the chat? It's kind of... Yeah, it's kind of stuttering on my end, but I don't know if that's just what OBS is showing me. And if it's coming through, fine. Yeah, it's good.
Number 7 is going to be fun though because yes, unions are responsible for number 7, but that's not a good thing.
Number 7 is minimum wage. I have a whole playlist on it if you want to know how terrible minimum wage is.
Yeah, and they are.
Well, and it wasn't even unions who were initially. Well, in a way it was. It was politicians who were trying to keep black people out of the workforce, and the unions were well, yeah, it was women too, and other undesirables.
White, different ethnicities of Jew, Asians, Native Americans, Hispanic mestizos, anyone that could be impacted by it that they didn't want, they'd use it, and then they assert it was a social benefit, quote unquote, back in the 1920s when the progressivists did it back then.
Yeah, but in the Davis-Bacon Act, they specifically mentioned blacks as the reason why. And the unions got behind it because, well, not all the unions got behind it. The white unions got behind it. And see, they'd been excluding blacks. And so blacks had formed their own unions, and they were trying to get the black unions out of the picture.
Oh, yeah. It was a shit show and a half.
Yeah. That's the thing that a lot of history professors don't tell you about the Gilded Ages is that a lot of labor unions were not about workers' rights and collective bargaining and all that. A lot of them were job protection rackets.
Yeah.
And it wasn't unheard of back in those days where it's like, if you weren't a member of this type of union, they would actually come to your place and trash your business, and because they were connected with local politicians, you couldn't do shit about it.
So anyway, number 8, because I think we've done minimum wage to death on this channel, so check out the playlist. Number 8, it's 2 things that I don't think go together, so we'll do one at a time. The first is collective bargaining. But we've been doing collective bargaining for thousands of years.
And even then, collective bargaining's not always a good thing, especially if the union is for a government agency.
Well, I mean, the thing is, this is where they go into an equivocation fallacy, because if you say, okay, we've got a bunch of people at this workplace and they're not happy about the way they're being treated, so they're going to get together, hire a lawyer or someone to represent them, and then the lawyer can go and negotiate with you don't need a union to do that, but then they'll say, well, that's the definition of a union. Well, that's not how unions are applied today, though.
Yeah.
No.
What I just described is more of a mutual aid society, which we're all in favor of. But unions today are more like medieval guilds.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Well, I call them protection rackets.
Yeah.
Well, the problem is that most corporate unions require that their members pay dues, and when you have that, the incentive is to increase the dues. So the unions are now incentivized to push for things like minimum wage and all that ridiculousness, because that means that if it goes through, it's a good chance that the union will increase the revenue it gets from union dues because of the higher pay, because it's generally a percentage
and
of
also
what the workers earn.
Well, and also less expenses, because it used to be the unions provided benefits to their workers, like healthcare benefits, unemployment benefits, and things like that. If you get the government to do that for you, then you don't have to undergo the expense of doing that yourself, and you can just rake in more of the profit from the dues, which they can't get out of because you've gotten politicians to pass a law saying that they have to join a union.
Going to what I said, if the union is for a government agency or whatnot, then the last thing they should be given is collective bargaining, because as we've seen with especially in my state, because here's the thing, the reason why collective bargaining is somewhat okay in a private company is because there is some even ground, because the company can still say, you know, listen, we can only give you as much as we make, and if we are going to give you this, you know, we're going to have to make sacrifices. That doesn't happen with government.
No.
Yeah, government just says yes, 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 and when they ask, well, where's all the money going to come from? They just say, oh, it's going to come from the taxpayers.
Well, not to mention the fact that you have union people on both sides of the table, because, you know, the board who's making all these decisions for the government is stacked with union people.
Yep. Yeah, you know, I mean...
I think it says everything if you grow up in a right-to-work state and have some businesses that are, you know, from states that have unions, and so when they open a location here, you know, you have to join the union when you join them, because that's, you know, that's the rules. When you're going around looking for jobs and you're saying, hey, is this a great place to work? And people say, oh no, whatever you do, don't work there because you'll be forced to join a union. That's bad.
Yeah.
That's bad. And that's what they say. No, you don't want to work there because you'd have to join a union.
Yeah.
That's bad. Now, this one is lumped in with it. I don't know what it has to do with collective bargaining, but it's the NHS. I think I've shown in How to Argue for Universal Healthcare, as well as numerous episodes of the Bogosity podcast, that the NHS is not a good thing.
Well, we see it right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know,
and Tony Blair, and he thought Tony Blair was a cunt. Watch this shit go even worse.
Mm.
I still have to facepalm at that interview that they did during the PM meeting, where that one British doctor is like, listen, we have patients that are waiting forever for life-saving critical surgery for cancers and all that. All this stuff's going on. What are you guys going to do besides throwing more money at it that's going to help things? And if I recall correctly, Boris Johnson couldn't think of anything, and the other guy was like, oh, I'll just throw more money at it.
Well, they just both spewed all their platitudes about how great and wonderful the NHS is, and yeah, they both said we'll throw more money at it, and it's like, and that isn't even the first time. I mean, I covered, you know, one, like the podcast years ago, this whole association of, you know, physicians and surgeons got together and wrote this, like, look, there are some fundamental problems with the NHS. What are you going to do about it? And it was kind of the same thing. It's like, people, the ones who are actually in charge of delivering the care are trying to tell you that there's something systemically wrong that you can't fix just by throwing more money at it.
And contrary to what I've heard some people say, the founder of the NHS was not a doctor. A lot of people say that it was a union of doctors that lobbied for the NHS. No, it was socialists and the Labour Party that got it passed.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, doctors, if I recall correctly, they were actually largely against it right from the beginning, because they pointed that out. You know, if we get government involved, there's going to be all this paperwork, all this bureaucracy, and it's actually going to make it hard for us to actually practically treat patients in a timely manner. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right, and so number 9, the last one, is sick pay, pay raises, and health and safety at work. Well, we've been getting pay raises. I mean, they give you pay raises. That's what they do. I mean, you didn't really have that much before capitalism, but once you got capitalism and the Industrial Revolution and workers could actually be more productive, then the pay raises just happened naturally.
And as for health and safety at work, I mean, that mostly improves because of better technology and whatnot. You know, I mean, that's actually why I kind of hate, you know, history textbooks that talk about how bad the Gilded Ages were, because it's like we had these workers working in hot air conditioned buildings and all that, and I'm just thinking, yeah, they didn't have air conditioning back then. Well, they did,
yeah,
but
it didn't exist.
But it would, well, I mean, they kind of did, but it was huge, it was expensive, and not to mention, the first air conditioners used toxic chemicals to power the machines. So,
well, I don't really think you had air conditioning, you know, towards the 20th century. You had refrigeration, but you know that wasn't really the same thing. I guess you could try refrigerating your work area, but I mean, it wouldn't really work all that well.
Yeah.
I mean, look at everything that who was it? Was it Gustavus Swift did all the R&D for the refrigerated rail car?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean
that
was they were still developing all those technologies there. So
yeah, you know, I mean,
and they were pretty much implemented as the technology was available. And again, imagine going into Bangladesh and mandating that.
Yeah. You know, it kind of reminds me about how people talk about OSHA and how it's like, oh yeah, OSHA is what ended, you know, the days of people, you know, being locked in the building, so if it caught fire they could escape. But it's like, no, but John Stossel took a look at it and he found that workplace accidents and deaths were actually already on the decrease as you know, long before OSHA came in. It was just the government jumping in front of the parade and saying, hey, look everyone, I'm leading.
Well, what they did was, and I've got a couple of videos on how dishonest this is, because like the gun control people do it too, you know, especially down in your neck of the woods, Pip. You know, when they start like with all of the gun deaths at the Port Arthur massacre and go, oh, look at how much it's gone down. But then you take the graph back a little bit and you find that they were already dropping at that rate. Well, it was the same thing with OSHA. You know, when they show you the benefits of OSHA, they start the graph the year that OSHA began, and they say, oh, look at how much it's been going down since then. Well, extend the graph back. It was always going down at that rate.
Yeah, John Stossel pointed that out, you know, he pointed out that, you know, they always say, look, when OSHA was passed, everything started going down, but he took a look at the data before OSHA was passed in. What do you know? It is going down. It was going down at the same rate. And actually, if I recall correctly, there was a couple little bits and pieces where shortly after OSHA was passed, where it actually stagnated. You know?
Yeah.
You know, and
I mean, sick pay, that just comes from competing for workers.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Which if anything, is one thing that the unions get in the way of.
Oh yeah.
Because anytime a worker says, "Hey, I'll come in and, you know, work for, you know, a different wage or a different benefit package or something like that," you know, the union jumps. Well, what's that word they have? They have a word for workers who try to go in and work on their own without joining the union. Scab? Is that it?
Yeah.
Scab.
Union scabs.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's how that is. And I mean, they have a history of being violent towards scabs. So, you know.
Especially if it's in the industry, in any industry where you're forced to join a union, because it essentially incentivizes the workers to support the union, even though the union is the one that's the friggin' problem.
Oh yeah, no doubt at all.
Yeah, and also going back to sick pay, I mean here's the thing, it also makes much more practical sense to allow it, because let's think about it, you know, if a rich greedy businessman wants to increase profits, you got to ask him this: how's he going to make money if all of his workers come in sick and he gets the customers sick, you know?
There's no incentive. The lefts love to fucking say, well, what? He poisoned people. How can he poison a motherfucker? Can't make a profit if he does that.
Yeah.
How does that fucking work, you head asses? And I've cussed many a motherfucker like that out so much for that bullshit.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, when you're talking,
One time I almost menstruated, I thought, for a moment, I got so mad.
Well, we're talking about things like health and safety. What do you get better productivity out of, a healthy worker or a sick worker?
Yeah.
Well, there's your answer.
Like, it's so stupid.
Why would businesses shoot themselves in the foot like that?
Yeah.
I mean, they're saying businesses do everything for the bottom line. Well, okay, here you go.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is, the only reason why we're seeing people coming, the only reason why today we're seeing a lot of people come into work, even though they're sick as dogs, is because of all the government pressure on that, meaning everything costs more, so people can't afford to take the occasional sick day off, not even businesses,
Yeah, half the national income taken in taxes, all of the all of the inflation that's been happening. I mean, just grocery prices going through the roof and things like that. And then all of the regulatory burden that businesses are put on that limit how much they can expand and grow and increase pay for their workers. Yeah, all that's bad for workers.
Yeah, I've actually heard from some of the older people that do say that, back in their day, contrary to popular belief, if you showed up to work, and you were sick as a dog, you were sneezing and coughing, you were running a fever, they would say, get the hell out of here, because
they didn't fuck home.
Yeah, because they didn't want you coughing and sneezing on the equipment and getting everyone else sick, and then we have to shut down production for a couple weeks because everyone's sick, But like I said, because of all the regulatory burden on a lot of businesses today, a lot of places literally have no choice but to come into work, sick. They have literally no choice but to just down a bunch of cold pills and try to make it through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah. And no, I don't want to hear how tough you are. It's like, oh, you get one itty bitty cold. What's wrong with that? It's like, hey, have you ever worked with a cold?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and it's not so much about you; it's about your coworkers not getting them sick.
Yeah. It's even worse because I don't want to gross you guys out, but I've worked in pizza places and I have seen guys who are really, really sick, like they can't keep anything down. They're running to the bathroom every 5 minutes and they still stay in work.
When you're working around food, that ain't good.
Yeah, and I'm just like, what the fuck are you thinking,
Mm.
Yeah, why are you doing that? But I think it's like you said, because of all the bull crap and government taking away half our paychecks, a lot of people in positions like that feel like they literally have no choice,
Well, and I've done this in a few videos, kind of a back of the napkin calculation. But just when you look at how much they take out in taxes, and I'm talking about federal, state, and local, all total. And when you look at how much they've done in inflation, and I think I did 35 years, kind of figuring that was around the median age of your basic worker. You're basically about halfway through your career at that point. So inflation over the last 35 years and the regulatory burden, government has basically absorbed 90% of your wealth. So think about someone making $10,000 today. It's really difficult to, a year, 10,000 a day would be great. 10,000 a year, it'd be really difficult to make it on 10,000 a year. But imagine if that 10,000 gave you the same purchasing power of someone currently taking home 100,000.
Yeah.
Then what would it mean to be poor?
Yeah, and tax tax evaders are thieves because that's another thing.
But I mean that's the thing. That's the people don't see. They don't see what government is actually costing us, and it's enormous.
Yeah, that's another thing I don't get. It's like when because like what I said earlier, it's like when they go to the Cayman Islands or Ireland or other states to register their companies, everyone's like, you're thieves, you're stealing from the taxpayers. I'm like, Who's the real thieves here? The guys who are just trying to keep as much of their money as they can, or the government that's taking your money out of pure arbitration? And don't give me the bullcrap. Oh, they're providing roads and all that. Most of the tax money they take from you does not go to those projects.
Right.
No,
it goes to bomb children in the Middle East.
They bomb kids in the Middle East. They give handouts to countries that we never consented to. We never have the ability to choose or vote on or any of that shit. And the other thing too is they're also pissing $4 trillion a year on just regulations alone. Fucking trillion.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's also going to funny things like setting up a program in China to teach Chinese prostitutes to drink responsibly. And the one that made me laugh the most was there was apparently a program where they went to South America where the point was they wanted to study why South American gay prostitutes engage in risky sexual behavior when they're drunk. It's like, geez, you don't know?
Yeah.
It's like, have you guys never been to a college fraternity party? Ugh.
When are you going to make another Lord Killian video? I just did on Friday.
Yeah. Speaking of which, Shane, you're talking about, when you did that video a long time ago about how bills become laws, apparently a lot of the new rules that a lot of the new bills that Biden's going to be pushing for, including the COVID law, it's full of earmarks.
No, of course.
Yeah,
they always are.
Apparently, so ridiculous.
Apparently, one earmark I read about was for the COVID relief bill is that there's a clause that says that the U.S. government will appropriate funds to teach Pakistan Indian school children about gender diversity.
It says, I didn't get a notification and I have the bell on. Yep, I'm hearing that more and more. The only thing I can tell you to do is go onto Twitter and complain to @Team YouTube.
Here, what's my favorite fucking my favorite shit failure at defending even the most minimal state. You know what's my favorite take?
What?
My social cohesion. I'm like, okay, first off, how does social cohesion form in the first fucking place? What's needed for that to exist? I'll give you the first two. Kinship and healthy communication. Once that happens, and they feed back into each other, that creates the beginnings of social cohesion, and it allows for customs and social norms and standards and traditions and to form to reinforce the first two, which causes the reinforcement of the said social cohesion. That's
why I would never be accepted as president, because I wouldn't pass anything because I'd keep asking questions. Congress. This Save the Babies Act. I got a question. What's that, Mr. President? What does appropriating several $million to the F-35 project, what does that have to do with saving babies? Oh, well, you see, you gotta sign it, Mr. President. It's for the benefit of the nation. Then again, considering how most bills are written, I would have just vetoed it, and my explanation would just be teal deer.
Yep.
Yeah.
Too long, didn't read.
And guess which organization hurts these core fundamental, foundations of social cohesion? What institute hurts them? The motherfucking state. It's got a very bad track record of it. So when I hear the social cohesion bullshit, I can't help but laugh at them and find it very hard to not condescend to piss out of them, to not look down my nose at them. It's really hard not to when I hear shit like that, in spite of the fucking track record.
And speaking of government hypocrisy, apparently Biden's, happy, at Congress because, they're abusing their power to make sure that everything Biden, passes gets through. Yet a couple years ago, they were whining about Republicans doing the same thing.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Hypocrisy.
Yeah.
People ask me, how do I view progressivism? I said, I hate it. I hate it with a bloodlust. I said, why? And I told them the hypocrisies. It just goes right over their head. They how can that be? Yeah. I'm like, have you seen the 20s when they reigned supreme in the political body? They were some of the most horrid pieces of shit.
Yeah, you know what's another thing I would do, Shane, if I were the president, is if they criticize me for not passing anything out, you know what I'd say? I'd say, okay, here's what it is. I will pass the first bill that comes to my desk. I won't even read it. I'll automatically pass it under one condition. What's that? All of you guys in Congress, you cannot run for your next election, and you have to let new people in.
Yeah, no new incumbents. That was one of. Okay. I found one weakness in the Article of Confederation that could have been fixed. There was 15. I'm gonna have to update that to 17 weaknesses in the main constitution.
Yeah, that's what I'd say. I'd say I'll pass the first bill that comes into my office. I won't even read it under the condition that when the senatorial terms come to an end, none of you guys are going to rerun. You have to let new people in. And something tells me no bill will be passed in my presidency because of that.
Yep.
Oh no, they wouldn't be. You have to start making executive orders to start shooting the son of a bitches right and left and help get fuckers to join you on drive-bys. That's what it's going to take to do that.
Oh yeah, that's another hypocrisy I'm seeing with Biden is, people were criticizing Trump. Trump for, all the executive orders he signed. Yeah, look at Biden. He's already passed like 30 of them on his first day in office.
And some really, really bad ones too. Like shutting down the Keystone Pipeline.
You'd have to be the next Vlad Impaler on these son of a bitches. You have to get something passed, which I would love to watch that personally because they have it coming. That's just me. I have a very fucked up sense of vengeance. In all honesty, as bad as Trump was, I honestly think the Biden administration is going to be 100 times worse. Well, no shit.
Yeah.
At least Trump did some good. For instance, his exposes on the rest of the establishment was the biggest thing.
Yeah.
The biggest parting gift he had. And you know what? Dave Smith called that shit by a mile.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, he also had those Middle East peace treaties. I don't think those are going to survive Biden.
Oh yeah, Biden. Oh yeah, despite what people say, Trump was actually a pretty peaceful president, and he actually set up a lot of deals. Biden, on the other hand, if you look at his history, he was a big warmonger.
Yep.
He always was both the neocons. So somebody's like, what are my views on conservatives? It's like, what type of conservative? Are you talking about mainstream? They say, yeah. I said, I hate them with blood. I hate them with literal bloodlust too. And it's like, why? I said, they're warmongers. Yeah. They all should be tried for treason as war criminals, but that ain't gonna happen. So what can you do?
Yeah.
The only realistic answer. They don't like what I have to say then. So,
yeah.
I say, what about the Hiroshima treatment? And they go quiet, or they see. Yeah. I'm like, because they tend to be neocons too, and I'm like, well, I guess you're a neocon. Well, I'll just throw you in with them. Prepare one. I got my McDonald's new credit.
Probably, I will say the dumbest thing that Biden wants to do is make America rejoin the Paris Peace Accord. And listen,
John
people
also nuked that so hard out the water.
Yeah,
so hard.
Yeah,
but
people.
Well, it was like less than a year after not joining the Accord, America had already exceeded the carbon requirements that they would have been under anyway.
Yeah, I'm pissing off more money through that Accord deal any goddamn way. Oh, look.
Yeah. Well, and what's shutting down the Keystone Pipeline gonna do?
Let's just not allow nuclear our financial system screeching away at the fucking scene.
Yeah, actually, many people have pointed out that shutting down the Keystone Pipeline will actually increase, carbon pollutants because, the beauty about oil pipes is that they can you can transport the oil without using too much, fossil fuels. But because the Keystone Pipeline's gone, we have to ship the oil using trucks and boats, and trucks and boats, give off pollution.
Yep.
So,
well, and even if he's thinking that we're not going to use that oil for energy, what's the alternative going to be? It's not going to be solar and wind. It's going to be coal, which has like 100 times the carbon emissions.
Yeah.
And it also, and when you're not using CO2 sequestering and steam reforming to catch the CO2 and turn it to synthetic fuels, you also have to worry about the lack of clean coal combustion.
Yep.
It's way more fucking radioactive, and the
Yep.
smoke is way more radioactive than a motherfucker.
Oh, yeah, the smoke and the coal ponds. Because the coal ponds are radioactive, too.
Yeah,
How is
Shane,
coal radioactive, you might say? Carbon-13. So it's how carbon dating works. Coal has a
well, there's also a lot of thorium that comes up with it.
That too. Salts that get puffed out in the air that you breathe if you live near it. So you're literally bombing your lungs with fucking nuclear fuel salts. Instead
of taking those nuclear fuel salts, putting them in a molten salt reactor, and turning them into energy.
Yeah.
How does that make sense?
Here's a shit kicker. Those molten salt reactors could be in what they call microreactors, where the main reactor unit, could be delivered by a fucking 18-wheeler. You can have your own a Delta style AC, harmonics resistance Delta style AC generation attached to each microreactor. And you can have a one stage for plutonium and for the uranium cycle. The second stage would be for the recycling of the waste from that to get the uranium isotopes turned into plutonium and run the plutonium with thorium. The third stage would be a fucking wet nuclear waste first and second generation actinide transmutation unit, which would generate massive thermal watts of fucking heat by just shooting electrons on these wastes to transmutate them and then generate massive fuck ton of heat. And that uses a molten lead cooling system to catch all that and then turn generators with
what I miss?
steam.
You know what I miss? The optimism around nuclear power from the old Thunderbirds.
Yep.
Yeah, we just
that was great.
That was
great.
Why?
Well, look at what we could do. Look at what we could do now. Just make an SMR to power, a business park or a large housing development or something like that. The first ones are going to be expensive, but you know what you're going to do? You go to Google and you say, hey, you could use one of these to power the Googleplex for the next 50 years. And then they're mass produced, so we just swap them out. And then you do the same thing at all these other, big, high dollar, big companies, and you just move down from there.
Yeah,
and you go to business parks and residential areas.
All this recklessness to quote unquote fight the global warming reminds me of what John Stossel said about this. He says, see, it used to be back in the old days, the only regulation was not in my backyard, but the new regulation is build absolutely nothing, absolutely nowhere.
Actually, it was banana. Build absolutely nothing anywhere near anybody.
Yeah.
Which is the logical extension of NIMBY.
The problem with it is, one, it's a logical extension of NIMBY, but it's got to be built somewhere. So where it's going to be built? It's going to be built where nobody with any influence gives a single crap, which is the third world. Everyone's going on about the plastic straws and they're causing plastic pollution. You don't know how to stop that? You process your plastic pollution in the country where it's generated and not ship it off to some third world countries where half of it gets dumped in the goddamn river.
Mm-hmm.
There you go. And you know what? You could literally make these micro reactors I was talking about. You can literally use these for businesses to make synthetic fuels to be powered by them. I could take this and gasification tech and literally just replace all the fucking landfills and garbage incinerators, gasification with self-sufficient, high employment, high output, regional efficiency, and sustainable fucking and a damn near permanent fucking synthetic gasification, synthetic fuel, and plants.
Yeah.
And you can also do this.
Didn't they sort of half by accident discover a kind of bacteria that eats plastic waste?
That means they've discovered that a couple different places. Yeah,
somewhere for the bacteria to eat.
Yeah, but I'm pretty sure the government's not going to allow it to be deployed because like I said, environmentalism is a religion now, and they got to keep it going. And and inventing back and discovering a bacteria that can potentially get rid of plastic is the equivalent of finding a reliable historical document which shows that the events in the Bible didn't happen.
But the best one they think is they found it was some kind of worm, I think, that its intestinal flora has evolved to be able to digest plastic. And that's one of the things they say, just put those into landfills, introduce those into landfills. Don't worry about recycling the plastic. Just put it in landfills and the worms will do it for you.
Yeah.
They also took the plastic-eating bacteria and they basically taught it to eat oil. And they're looking at using just dumping it into oil spills so the bacteria helps clean up the oil.
Well, Paul Stamets is doing that with fungal mycelium and fungal spores as is, and it was very high efficiency. And not only that,
but a bacterial cleanup. A bacterial cleanup
strain to do this, and it not only ate the oil spill, it peroxidized it as a carbon material to build itself up. It also accumulated all the salts and all the heavy metal shit that's in petroleum as is, and pulled it into itself. No, you got to do.
But a bacterial cleanup.
Take that slag, extract the toxins, the rest of the slag for roads, and there you go. You add to my industry, the synthetic natural gas industry, powered by nuclear microreactor.
Yeah, but a bacterial cleanup though is going to be a lot cleaner because you can make the bacteria be self-cleaning. Basically, they self-destruct once they run out of food, and then you're not introducing something invasive potentially into the ecosystem.
Yeah, the mushroom culture would be for a land-based spill because you would actually be able to contain it. Yeah, the self-destructive bacteria would be best for the ocean. Yeah.
Well, I mean, they've also discovered that type of fungus in Chernobyl that's heavily resistant to radiation and actually absorbs it. So some people have actually argued that would actually make nuclear power safer because should worst case scenario happen, radiation does leak from the nuclear plant. They can just they can use the mushrooms to clean it up, But they don't want to hear it because nuclear power bad because nuclear power equals nukes. That's one reason why I can't forget.
Here's another one. In the Green New Deal, the Green New Deal socialist, state socialist bullshit, they actually emphasize on wind and solar. Do you not realize how much plastics are in solar and where plastics come from, folks? Fucking oil.
It's not even the plastic. It's like a lot of the heavy metal stuff is mined in third world countries. Like, do they care about like the toxic runoff from those refineries? No, they don't.
And then they're generally strip mines too.
Strip mine. There you go. Another fucking. So you got third world shithole exploitation, like at the expense of the people. There's no actual benefit from taking advantage of it. Just exploiting the fuck out of them in a way that actually. It's at their expense. And there's no real improvement to them, and then you got the plastic element from fucking coal tar and oil. There you go. Bullshit. It's absolute crock.
Okay, gentlemen. Okay, gentlemen. I think I've reached my limit here, so we can pick this up on Friday, hopefully with the live stream, 8 p.m. Eastern. So we can see y'all then.
We'll take care of yourselves. If anyone wants the references about the nuclear microreactors and other research, just DM me and I can send them to you guys, and then whatnot.
And if you want to know generally about nuclear and other forms of power, Illinois Energy Prof on YouTube is a great channel.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. I don't have the energy to do the standard sign-off, but I think y'all know what to do. Donate.pagosity.tv. Thank you so much. We'll see you on Friday.
Hopefully I'm there too. I'll see y'all around.
Yeah, I'll probably